first I'm going to start out by using a pencil to draw a lighthouse landscape. It might help you if you take a ruler and make a horizon line with your ruler, just like that. Hold down with one hand, trace with the other, really lightly, to help you get where the sky meets the water behind your lighthouse landscape. After you get done drawing in Sharpie, then you're going to add the Zentangles, which basically a Zentangle is just a pattern. And you can think of a lot of different patterns. You can take inspiration from things that are around the room. For example, on the Art is Amazing poster on the back wall, there are Zentangles in the background, basically just a bunch of lines and shapes that create different patterns. Something like this. So in my sun, I am going to make curved lines like this. In the rays of the sun, some different patterns. So here is a time lapse to show you what it will look like. After you have added patterns in the sections of your drawing, and it doesn't have to be in every single part of your drawing, so I kind of left my rocks a little empty, and I didn't add but just a little bit of a pattern on my lighthouse so they will still stand out. Okay, now you're going to be using a few different Sharpies. So there are Sharpies that have a thick edge, there are Sharpies that you normally use that have the fine point, and then there are extra fine point. So for this, I want you to use a thick Sharpie to trace the lines of your main drawing. So not your patterns, but like your horizon line, the first parts of the drawing that you made, your lighthouse, the rocks that you made, the waves, and the sun, maybe the sailboat, those with thick line Sharpies. So when you're done, it'll look something like this. You can really see your lighthouse, the sun, the waves, the rocks, the boat. They really stand out. So you'll find the bold Sharpies or the thick Sharpies in the boxes that say bold Sharpies. How about that? And those are for the big parts of your lighthouse. Now for the rest, you're just going to use plain old Sharpies to trace the patterns or Zentangles that you have put in your lighthouse drawing. So when you're done tracing all your lines with a fine line Sharpie and a bold Sharpie, it'll look something like this. Then all that's left to do is to add some watercolor paint. So when we start painting, you're going to be using watercolor, and the watercolor palettes have wells of paint, so they look like this, and obviously it's dry right now. So in order to make watercolor paint work, you have to add some water. Now this watercolor is kind of soft, which means that you could dip out a big chunk of it, but if you know anything about watercolor, you know that that's not a good idea because it makes your painting really sticky, and that's not something you want. So as you apply your watercolor, make sure that it's looks kind of watery. That's a good idea, and it's okay to put watercolor down and then color over it with a different color. That will mix it together, kind of like this. In your painting, be sure that you make your sun or sky a nice warm color, so either red, yellow, orange, or a combination of those, and your sea more of the cool colors, so blues, greens, and purples. That will help to differentiate between the sky and the sea. when you're done, it'll look something like this. I want you to notice something. Whenever you're using watercolor, something that happens a lot is the colors, since there's so much water, the water will touch and it will immediately start to run into other areas. So, for example, like right here, this black is getting ready to go into the part where I made it red. Okay, so all you have to do is take a little bit of paper towel and rub on top of it, and you'll be able to pick up a lot of the color. Now, it doesn't always work perfectly because it is paint, but after you do that, this watercolor is usually thick enough that you can go back and fix it to make it look how you want. Now, if the watercolor is covering up your lines so you can no longer see the Sharpie lines that you drew in your patterns with your patterns, then that probably means that you put your watercolor on too thick. So even Miss Starnes does that sometimes, and I put my watercolor on too thick. So if that's happening, you can always take a paper towel and just press onto it and pick it back up, and it will help to get rid of all the extra watercolor.